All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to a special Red October show. That's right, Red October every day. At this time, we're going to be doing specials, MLB playoffs. And that's right, Red October as the Fightins quest for the World Series. And yeah, man, we're presented by Ace Hardware Home Services. Visit Ace Hardware Home Services online at acehardwarehomeservices.com to get started on your next project. That's right. Ace is the place for Red October. And joining me, guys, we're going to go over all the series as we get you ready for Saturday, right? All eyes on Saturday in Philadelphia, 4:30 will be the game one of the NLDS between the Phillies and the winner of Mets and Brewers. And we know the Mets are up 1-0. They play tonight at 7:30. So we're going to be doing these shows every day for you to get you set and celebrate the MLB playoffs. Nothing better than baseball playoffs. I wax poetically about it all the time. The game is just special. And so I got with me one of the great baseball men in the Delaware Valley. He's the head coach at the University of Pennsylvania. That's right, Penn baseball coach John Yurkow, my guest analyst today, and I love John. Welcome, John. Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Anthony. I'm looking forward to talking about some Phillies baseball for sure.
But you know what I love is that you're a baseball man. Before the show, you and I were talking about this, how special it is, how the sport changes in October.
Yeah, it's great. I'm walking into work today, and the weather's a little crisper. You can kind of feel it in the air. You can put your hoodie on now, and it just we've been really lucky the last couple of years here in the city. The experience we've had watching the Phillies and following them, it's just awesome. The city really comes alive, and I think everybody's really looking forward to this weekend.
And the game itself changes, right? The game becomes slower. Every pitch matters. There's a greater attention to detail. And you as a collegiate baseball coach and understanding the game the way you do, that you've lived it your entire life, those details, they matter. And, listen, 162 games during a regular season, guys aren't running out every ball. Things change, but you really bear down the playoffs.
Yeah, it's every pitch people are locked in. The crowds are great. You're watching all these games yesterday and people are standing the whole time, the first game of the wild card. And, it really gets you fired up. And it really just goes to show, you're right. Like, all the little things really come to play. They're all magnified, whether it's a base running mistake or somebody maybe not getting a bunt down, moving a runner this time of year. All those things become really important. Hopefully the Phillies will really do a good job with all the little things this weekend.
And what I love too is that the chess match between pitcher and batter is really on display, right? Like when you got a guy like I was watching Padres last night, and you got Michael King, who's absolutely filthy, right? And you're up, you're one of the Braves, and you're a Braves hitter, and you're trying to guess, especially his stuff, because it can look a certain way, the same way, and it can go left or it can go right. So a lot of times you're guessing.
Yeah, I tell you who I really felt bad for last night was Ozzie Albies. I mean, he's been out. He comes back. He's trying to play hurt, and he has to hit right-handed off of King, who's just nasty against right-handers. He's got that two-seamer boring in on guys. He can throw that sweeper, and then he can buzz you with like a four-seam fastball up in the zone. He's got really good stuff, and he pitched great last night for those guys.
Yeah, and in that moment of, all right, like, where am I sitting at? What's the count? What am I looking for? Right? And there's no waste, right? Like, and during a long season, pitchers aren't bearing down at every pitch. There's no waste in the playoffs.
No, the margins are so slim, right? And it really comes down to maybe, if you can foul a tough pitch off here and there and try to get yourself into a better count, that 2-1 pitch, if you can, it's such a big deal, whether it goes to 3-1 or 2-2, and if you get yourself into a hitter's count, now you can cheat a little bit, and that's where your doubles and your home runs come in.
It's funny. We were talking before the show when you said, what you love as a coach is that there's so many teaching moments that come from October.
Yeah, it's again like for us this time of the year, we're in fall ball and our guys are locked into all the games and watching every one of them. And the next day they'll come and say, "Hey, coach, did you see what they did last night? It's the same thing you were practicing on the other day, whether it be a relay throw from the outfield or maybe like a guy executing a double play ball or something like that, very specific." And yeah, it's the same things that we're trying to get our guys to do. I wish we could execute on the same level as the big leaguers do, but we're still working at it.
So before we get to all the individual series and the showdown between the Mets and Phillies is looming quite large. Before we could dive into the particular series, let's look at it from the Phillies' perspective. Baseball's a game of repetition, right? And the only fear that comes when you have the bye is that you sit around for a week, right? And a lot of times, there's something about the game that when you don't see live, right? When you're not in game mode every day, that a week off, sometimes there's rust, sometimes at the plate, especially for hitters. How do you ward against that if you're a topper?
Yeah, that's probably the one thing I think, you get the bye. And we've seen, and the Phillies have been, coming out on the right side of this in years past when they did get in as a wild card and they were red hot and they were able to roll right through without having a long break. So they're in a different situation now, right? Hopefully, and it sounds like today they were going to have a pretty, I guess, like a simulated game, but they're trying to make it as game-like as possible, which I think is a great idea on a Wednesday. You get your guys out there. The hitters are seeing live arms, and you just really want to try to get it locked in as close as you can to an actual baseball game. Easier said than done. And we've been in this situation before too, like going in the NCAA postseason where you have like 8-9 days, and you really, as a head coach, have to sit there with your staff and think about, all right, what's the best way that we can get our guys ready to go so when the Phillies play on Saturday, they're locked in. I think it's harder on the hitters for sure. Like hitters want to hit every day, right? And it's such a rhythm and timing thing. It's just hoping that the Phillies, they've been here, they've got a lot of experienced hitters. I'd like to think that those guys are going to do what they need to do to be ready for the Mets or the excuse me, who else would it be? Or the Brewers. Sorry. Yeah, we all have Mets on the brain right now. I saw a stat last night where if you win the first game of the wild card, it's like 88% chance that you're going to want to win the series.
Only 2 teams have come back from losing the first game to win it.
Yeah, that's crazy. The other thing that's crazy is the Phillies have never played the Mets in a playoff series. That's hard to believe.
You know what's amazing, John, is that it's so interesting. The Phillies and the Mets have really never been good at the same time. Like go back to the history. And when that one run of the 80s with Schmitty and Boa and Rose and all, the Mets weren't any good. Then the Mets get good with Gooden, right? And that whole team that makes the run to the 86 World Series and the Red Sox and the whole thing. And the Phillies weren't any good.
Right.
Go fast forward, 93, the Phillies were good. The Mets weren't. The Mets were good in the early part of 2000s. And then they petered off right as the Phillies were about to start their ascent in 2007, right? Remember that? And then really it's never been the same until now. And I think it's fascinating. And interestingly, the Sixers and Knicks up until last year, same thing. They weren't never good at the same time. So having this kind of rivalry this close is pretty awesome. It's great theater.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're going to have some Mets fans trying to sneak into Citizens Bank. I think that's going to happen. So that'll add another layer to it. And I think anytime you have like a regional rivalry like this, and you're in the playoffs, it just adds more to it, the excitement. And it should make for a great series.
So let's get back to the Phillies this week. Now, obviously, it's great for wear and tear having this week off and Bryce's elbow and getting everybody kind of healthy and rested and feeling good and mentally. Like, you could talk to this. The mental strain of baseball is like no other sport because it's a mind bleep, right? It's a mind game every time, warding off slumps and taking it into the field and, pitching and dead arm and all that stuff. It just messes with your brain sometimes.
Yeah, and I think I was reading an article just today about Trey Turner. He had an interesting quote about it's all really about perspective. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but he said, "Listen, if some guys may say, hey, I needed the break. I'm sore. I needed a couple days off. I'm sure JT Realmuto, Harper, those guys will probably benefit from this. Or you could be on the other side of it and say, hey, I was going really hot. I don't want to stop playing." So it's all about perspective. I would think with so many veteran players on that team that they're going to wind up handling it the right way. I think this is something too where with Rob Thompson, where I think he's been in enough of these battles and enough of these playoff series. I'd be really surprised if they don't come out ready to play on Saturday. And you're right. It's such a grind, man. It's 162 games. I remember it was 2 months ago when people were panicking because the Phillies weren't playing that great. I think that's going to happen to every team at some point during the season. It all worked out.
It has to. It's that quote, and I probably said it during that period, 100 times. It's baseball. Baseball is very real. I mean, it is the nature of that sport. It is a mental as well as physical because of the daily nature of it. But the mental piece of it, I can't stress enough. It's great to give your mind a break. It's why you get off days, and that's why you'll get a break. You need to just kind of get away from it. Let me ask you, because I prepping to going back to hitting live, because I often found that the only way to truly prepare is to hit live. I mean, BP, machine work, all your hitting work, that's great, but it can't simulate what's going to take place Saturday.
Yeah, and then the other thing you have to factor in, and I don't think people talk about this enough with hitters, when the games and the energy in the stadium, it gets ramped up. There's more adrenaline, right? And that's the other thing you have to factor in, right? These guys can get a little jumpy from time to time. You'll see it. Like you could have a great hitter and just, sometimes the moment becomes a little bit, you're a little anxious, you're a little tight, and you're not as loose, and your bat doesn't get through the zone maybe the same way it normally would. You foul a pitch off that normally you might hit out for a home run. You saw it even yesterday. Like if you look at the games yesterday, a lot of those games were lower scoring games, right? And what I find is those series tend to get longer. And again, it's baseball, so the numbers are going to average out. The good players are going to do great things, right? They're going to drive more balls. In a 5-game series or a 7-game series, I think you get a little bit better snapshot, a sample size. But you're right. Like for a hitter, the best thing you can do to prepare for this is face live arms. There's no getting around that. You can simulate things. There are pitching machines out there that guys use. That's helpful, but it's just not the same as seeing a live arm coming at you.
And to your point about adrenaline, which I think is brilliant, like you saw it last night with Ozuna, there was a big moment, and King has such incredible movement, and like you just saw, he had one swing and miss with a ball that was well out of the strike zone, and that was a complete, I'm facing this pitcher with a lot of movement, and I got tons of adrenaline going through me, and it's a spot. And then you'll see that swing and miss. I think you'll see a lot more swings and misses in October.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's what makes like the superstars super. It was watching like Harper last year, and when Castellano, he got hot. Like those guys have the ability to just slow the game down in the biggest moments. And that's why they're superstars, and unfortunately, the way Lindor's playing right now, he's at that level. He's a guy that's scary when you think about that lineup, and he's an MVP type player. And it was interesting because he struggled for a while when he first got to New York, and I think a lot of people thought, oh, he took the payday and he's just going to coast. Well, he decided he made some adjustments, and he's had an unbelievable year. He's a dynamic player. He can do it all. He can run. He can hit. He can play great defense. So he's going to be a challenge for the Phillies.
No, dude, you're so right. I mean, everybody thought, wow, is he a bust? He's not nearly the same player he was in Cleveland. And this year, he was better last year. This year, he is back to that being that elite game changing talent. Go back to Bryce for a second. And this is one of the reasons why I think the Phillies, I feel good about. They seem like they embrace the moment, right? Like they embrace this stuff. They love the spotlight. They love the home crowd. They love the spotlight. There was no bigger home run than Bryce off of Suarez through the raindrops, right? To send them to the World Series 2 years ago. Like those guys, they feel like they grow in the spotlight instead of shrink.
Yeah, people. I think they criticize the Phillies that sometimes they look like during the regular season they're too loose and they actually play like things don't matter. But I think when you get to this time of the year, I think it's a benefit. It's a positive thing because you never feel like with those guys and the way they approach the game. I think a lot of that you got to give some credit to Rob Thompson too. I think
Yeah.
that's the reasons. Like, listen, we could all sit here and criticize managers, right, and for making decisions along the year. Right? That's great. That's what's great about baseball, right?
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I think he's a good manager for this group of guys. And it's sometimes we get frustrated because maybe they make a base running mistake here, or they do a mental mistake, and people say, "Oh, he doesn't get on him enough, and he doesn't do this and that." But I think that's also one of the reasons why these guys really love to play for him. He's definitely a player's coach, and there's definitely a connection there, and I
Yeah.
do really think it's contributed to their success in the postseason.
I agree with you. I thought there was a moment that really encapsulated what Topper's kind of role. Like there's respect there. Bryce, remember, thinks it's a home run. There was a play where he didn't run that ball out. He thinks he got all of it. And then there was another moment where he should have been on third. And he's walking to the dugout, and Topper doesn't need to say anything. Thompson looks at him, and he kind of gives him like a side-eyed look. And Bryce right away, my bad. Like, I'm sorry, my bad. And that's all that needed to be said. Like there was no, people were saying, "Oh, you got to sit him and this and that." It was ridiculous. Like there needed to be no punitive from the manager because the manager gave him the look like, "Yo, dude, you know better," and he gave it my bad. Like I know I my fault, and that was that moment. And I actually talked to Rob about that, and that was it. Like, listen, I have a superstar player. I mean, he knows the deal, but he also knows that some things are expected of him, and I wasn't happy about that, and he got it, and that's and then we're past it.
Yeah, and maybe what happens after that, like you have a meeting that's obviously behind closed doors, or you just say, "Hey, listen, man, like, you're our superstar, you're our MVP. Not a great look if you're doing that." And I'm sure the way Harper approached the game, he, like you said, he knew it.
Yeah.
Nothing else needed to be said at that point. I thought he handled it. It was perfectly fine the way they handled it. You move on. Again, it's a long season. Guys make mistakes. Guys get frustrated. I think maybe that was part of it too. There's ups and downs. It's such a long season, but again, he's got them back, right? And that's 3 years in a row, and that's not easy to do.
No, it's not. Let's talk about a little the lineup itself. I mean, I think you got to play Rojas in center. I think, again, Martian left against righties. That's your best defensive lineup, and I think you need to play. Whether he goes 0 for 4, 0 for whatever. I mean, I still think you need to play him in center.
Yeah, it's the Mets are heavy left-handed arms, which is interesting, right? So the Phillies are probably going to have to platoon some of those right-handed hitters a little bit. Yeah, I feel the same way you do. I think you have to play Rojas. He's your best defender in the outfield by far. He covers a lot of ground, and like you said, if it's an 0 for 4, if he's playing good defense, maybe he can make something happen with his foot speed. That's kind of how I would start, especially when you're playing. You got the two horses going at the front of the rotation, because those guys are liable to have or keep you in like a a 1-run game, it's 2-1, 1-0 going in the 7th, 8th inning, the last thing you want to do is have a ball drop in front of your outfielder that maybe like Rojas would have caught. So I agree with you. I would try to play my best defensive club. And for me, that's probably playing Rojas in center field.
You agree? I see about the lineup for a second, and especially it's a great point you bring up with, Minaya and Peterson. They're two of their starters are lefties, and Turner is going to be so big in this series because if you get Turner going, if you got him cooking, I mean now you got Schwarber, Turner, Bryce. Like I think he holds such a key that if he's cooking. I love their chances. No matter, I know we talk a lot about the kids and Bohm, and Stott's been struggling, and Bohm has been a little bit of a funk over the second half. But I mean, I think Turner is such a key to this lineup.
Yeah, he's a special player, right? Because he can beat you a couple different ways. He's got power, he's got speed. He's a threat to steal a base. Really, what I think it's going to come down to with all the left-handed pitching they're going to see, I think it comes down to Turner, Castellanos, and Real Muto. Because you've got 3 experienced hitters. They've been there for 3 years, and they're going pretty good right now too. So they're going to get a lot of looks against left-handers, and those guys hit the ball pretty good against left-handers. So that's where the Phillies are going to have to make their hay. I think. Hopefully they get some guys on in front of those guys, and they're going to drive some runs in for them.
You bring up a great point about JT because JT is healthy, right? He's been out a lot. Over the course of the season, he's now healthy. He's right. He looked good last month, right? So I'm with you. I think JT is a huge factor right there against their lefties. That's a great point.
Yeah, we're so spoiled by watching him on a daily basis. And we're talking about the offense, but guess what? What he does as far as managing a pitching staff, how good he is behind the plate, blocking balls, throwing guys out. People joke, best catcher in baseball. It's true. He is the best catcher in baseball. And it's like he shows up every day. To me, he's kind of like the heart and soul of that team. And it kind of reminds me a little bit when the Phillies back when they had Dalton, when they had Dutch.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
He's like the quarterback out there. Everybody looks up to him. He always does the right thing. And anytime he needs a big spot, just very humble. That's kind of what he reminds me of.
Yeah, that's a great comp. How would you set up the rotation? So obviously Wheeler game 1. Would you go Sanchez game 2 because he pitches so much better at home, and Nola, who is unflappable, and you could pitch him at Citi Field if it's the Mets? I mean, we're assuming it's the Mets, but would you set your rotation up that way?
I would run Wheeler, Nola, and then go with Sanchez in the 3 spot. I want my top 2 guys going the first 2 games. I know the splits are pretty crazy with Sanchez,
right?
And it's something to think about. But just knowing how Rob Thompson does things, I'd be shocked if he's flipped Nola and Sanchez in it's game 2 and 3.
How would you handle Ranger right now?
Well, I mean, I'm not there, and I'm not watching what's going on this week as far as the lead up. I think what they might wind up doing, depending on how he feels physically, they could use him in some spots where 2-3 inning, kind of like a swing guy to get it to your late guys in the bullpen, because they did that last year a little bit, right? I mean, I think
2 years ago they did it with him too. Remember against I mean that was it. He came up big. He was unflappable because he's unfazed by those moments. Yeah,
and I think he's a guy he can one time through the order right now. I think he'd be really good. I just don't know how he's going to hold up after that. He throws tons of strikes. His command's usually really good. He feels all the little intangible things are great for him coming in out of the bullpen. And again, at the moment's not going to be too big for that guy. I mean, that guy, you want to talk about having a slow heartbeat.
My God, that's Ranger. But what are you seeing? And I know you're not there, but just from his starts, velo down, right? Like he desperately needs to needs to amp it up a little bit, because otherwise he's just being around the strike zone, and you're throwing 87, 88.
Yeah, that's not going to get it done consistently. And one of the barometers that we use when we're watching guys in an outing is if you see a sudden drop in velocity, it's like, hey, we got to get this guy to the game. And the first thing you think of and you dread is, oh, is he hurt? Did he do
Right.
something wrong with his arm? And he's had back issues. There's obviously something going on there. I don't know if the Phillies are going to come out and say exactly what it is. I don't blame them. But he's not. He's just not 100%. And you have to ask yourself, is it worth having Ranger at 85 to 90%? And if the answer is yes, then you probably are better off using them in short stints, right? Rather than trying to stretch them and go 4 or 5 innings.
All right, let's dive into each of the series that's going on right now because we have 2 big games tonight that are happening. It is the Red October special presented by Ace Hardware. That's right, Ace Hardware Home Services. Visit Ace Hardware Home Services online at acehardwarehomeservices.com to get started on your next project. So this Mets-Milwaukee series, man, I mean, let's talk about the Mets for a second. How hot, quite frankly, I spent all day saying how much I'm afraid of them because we saw them in the doubleheader on Monday, and the Braves are up 3-0. They're cruising. It's the 8th inning. Then they explode. And then the Braves come back and put a 4 spot up at the bottom of the inning to take the lead. And then Lindor hits the 2-run homer to win it. Yesterday, they're in a 2-0 hole early, right? They come back. They score 3 in the top of the second. Milwaukee comes back. They score 2 to take a 4-3 lead. And then in the 5th inning, they get a 5-run, 2-out rally. So, like, you can see they're just brimming with confidence at the plate.
Yeah, I thought you got to give the Mets starter credit because the command wasn't there. He hits Hoskins. He's leaving everything arm side early in the game. All of his misses.
Severino, yeah.
Yes, Severino. And, he's a hard throw. He's got a great arm, but the command wasn't there. You almost wonder, right? Maybe the moment, a little bit too much adrenaline early on. He kind of had to settle in, and he did. And he gave him a chance. I thought that was big for the Mets because I thought at one point he wasn't going to make it past 2 innings, and it was going to wind up being like a 3-4 run game early for the Brewers. But yeah, he hung in. The Mets are hot right now, man. They're playing with a lot of confidence. It didn't faze them that they were down. Kind of an interesting lineup too, because they have some guys that can drive the ball, but then they also have some guys that like work counts. They just slap balls around the infield. So yeah, it's going to be tough for the Brewers. I mean, I think if you're a Phillies fan, the best thing you could hope for, no matter what, is if the Brewers win tonight and they force that series to go to a 3rd game, right?
Yeah.
The Mets played a lot of baseball in the last 5 days, right? And you almost wonder, like, the cumulative effect of that, if they do wind up winning the series and you get to play them, if that could come in and be a factor in the next series.
Yeah, it's a great point about Severino because he kind of settles down. And it looked like, you're right. Like, it looked like Milwaukee, especially in the 1st inning. I mean, they could have went for a 4 or 5 spot. Severino gets out of it, runs into trouble again in the 4th, and then he kind of settles down in a big way. And then they don't even have to use Diaz. Like, so you don't even have to burn your closer in the 1st game, which I thought was big.
Yeah, that's huge for them. He's coming back now tonight, well rested. So, like, if they got into a spot where they needed to get 5 outs, they could run him out there for like a 5-out save if they really had to. That's the other thing that factors into the playoffs that's really interesting too, because you have some off days mixed in. But if you have a deep bullpen and you only get 4 innings out of a starter, and then you kind of get off schedule, you're bringing guys into different roles, and then over the course of that 7-game series, that's where you see the effect of it, right? And you can get hurt as that series goes on. But yeah, that was big for them. He set on, I think he just over 100 pitches. I mean, at one point, it looked like he was going to throw 80 pitches in 3 innings. And he did a great job for them. And that's how it is. Sometimes, like, those top of the line starters, you get him on the ropes, and Nola does it. Sometimes you'll watch him; he doesn't have his best stuff early in the game, and it looks like things are going to get out of control. But they just have a way of finding, they find a way to make some pitches in big spots, get some guys out, and he did a great job. That was a big win for the Mets last night.
It really was. I mean, I'm with you. I was impressed. I mean, it goes back to when you're hot and you start to feel it. And they win last night, and this is amazing. They win last night, and Lindor, Iglesias, and Nimmo are combined 2 for 14.
I
So they
know.
win without the top of the order setting the table. They put up 8 runs, and the top of the order is not even, cooking.
Yeah, and I mean, you get into the playoffs, and there's going to be times where you need maybe some of those role guys to step up. And that's a great example of it. Like your superstars aren't going to be great all the time. It's just how it is, right? Lindor goes 0 for 4, I think, last night, and they had some other guys step in with some big hits, and the Mets are feeling it right now, man. They're a lot of guys contributing for them on offense.
You know who I love is Vientos. I think the young player, he's got a lot of pop. He's smart ball player, and he just gets big hits. He got a couple big hits for him yesterday, and he's an undervalued player, young player.
Yeah, he's going to be a good player. Pretty interesting skill set. He can do a little bit of everything. It'll be interesting watching those guys the next couple nights. Like you said, I think there's a good chance they're going to wind up coming here to Philly on Saturday.
Oh my God, I just can't imagine. I just don't want it to be like the Sixers and Knicks when the Knicks fans basically took over. It was a siege, and they took over the Wells Fargo Center. I can't envision that at Citizens Bank Park. I think no matter how much money and tickets are on the second market and New York money's out there, the Philadelphia defends the bank, right? Like, there's no way they're not going to defend the bank.
You would think so, but I don't know. We've had some times this year where I know it was a regular season games, but there were quite a few Mets fans that came down. It's funny. I've got some buddies that are Mets fans. I actually have a former staff member that works for the Mets now, who's a great guy, and I've been texting him in the last couple of weeks, and he just kept saying, "Man, wouldn't it be great if we wound up playing you guys in a couple of weeks?" And I said, "No, not really." But
listen, I was watching the game room for Milwaukee all day long, man.
Yeah, it seems like we're on a collision course though right now. So,
well, let's go to the other series, because the collision course of Phillies Mets on one side of the bracket and Padres Dodgers on the other side of the bracket. Wow, I mean, two cities, rival cities, smaller versus the larger one, right? 2.5 hours away, 2 hours away. It's just got like great theater for MLB. The Padres, though, to me, I fear them more than the Dodgers. I think their lineup is now balanced, and their pitching is better.
Yeah, I think the Dodgers have had so many injuries with their arms that they're kind of in flux right now. I think the Phillies match up, you're probably right, better against the Dodgers. Obviously, I think the Dodgers lineup, I mean, you got superstars up and down that lineup.
I mean, Ohtani, Betts, Hernandez, Will Smith, Muncy, like they just go on and on and on at you.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, you win in the playoffs with pitching, right? You got to have a couple horses at the front that are gonna, that can win some close games. And right now, if you look at the Padres pitching, bullpen, starting pitching, they're probably more balanced than the Dodgers. And I just feel like right now with all the injuries that the Braves sustained this year, and you could just tell like Albies isn't right. He's out there trying to let it out. And I think he's an unbelievable player when he's healthy. And he's out there trying to give everything he's got, but I just don't see. I'd be shocked again if they came back and won 2 games against San Diego.
No, I mean, listen, God bless the Braves, and as much as we dislike them, you'd never wish that on your enemy, right? I mean, to lose Acuna and Strider, you're losing an MVP and a Cy Young candidate like that, and Albies, like you said, just got back. I mean Austin Riley, right? Yeah. You lose your starting third baseman, all that pop. So I mean, they've been through it. Look at the pitching matchup tonight because it's a great one. Fried versus Musgrove. Musgrove's come back. He's looked really good. Fried obviously is their ace. Other than back spasms, right? Like what? That was one of the things that was a big deal. Is that when you got a guy of that ilk, right, who can't throw because of back, that was a big loss. But Fried is their number 2. And who do you like tonight?
Yeah, I
Chris
just think
Sale,
San
I'm talking
Diego's
about.
so hot. Yeah, I just think they're rolling right now. You're watching that game last night, and they come out, they get a single, opposite field single, Arias, he gets on base, and then all of a sudden Tatis hits a ball 440 feet, and that place was like going nuts. And you get that early lead, and in those types of environments, it's tough for teams to fight back through that, and then you just tack on as well as King threw. He was nasty last night, man. What a great trade, by the way.
Right?
That turned out awesome for them.
I mean, it's amazing because, like, obviously Soto's a great player, but you get that kind of arm, my God, and the way they're set up. Oh my God, they're deep in a rotation, and they have the best bullpen in baseball right now.
Yeah, they're scary. I think that's like one of those trades where maybe it worked out for both teams.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with Soto with free agency, right? If he's going to wind up staying as a Yankee, I guess if he stays, it's obviously a better trade for the Yankees. But you're looking at a guy that looks like he could be a legit number 1 for a long time, right? Young guy, great stuff. The moment wasn't too big for him last night. I thought for a younger arm, not a ton of playoff experience. You don't know what type of environments he's pitched in. I thought he was great.
The other pitching matchup is Minaya against Frankie Montaz. What do you make of that? Minaya is one of those dudes. I don't know how he does it. Right, lefty, crafty. I kind of hate his arm. I like the power. Right, like you watched Scooble yesterday, and you watch that power lefty that reminded us of like Steve Carlton back in the day. Minaya's not that.
No, you don't see. It's funny, you don't see many of those like crafty left-handers anymore. The way the game has changed, with everybody trying to chase velocity, but those guys can really frustrate you at times.
Yeah.
Throwing a lot of off-speed stuff, change ups, and really trying to get guys out on their front foot, just trying to stay off the barrel as much as they can. A lot of soft contact. I don't really know what to think of this matchup. As far as on the mound, I don't think you're going to see a ton of strikeouts. So you could wind up seeing another high scoring game out there. Maybe Hoskins gets a couple good swings off tonight for the Brewers. He hits left-handers really well. Maybe something to look for there. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Brewers are a good team. I don't think they're going to go down without a fight. Like I think they're gonna get in there and they're gonna. Or I'm sorry, but I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch how it all plays out.
Well, to your point, I'm with it. They also can give you a good right-handed lineup, right? Like, so against the lefty, you got Contreras, you got Gary Sanchez, who still has pop, right? Churio, I love. Like, he's fantastic. Adames has got great power from short. So, like, and you mentioned Reese. So they can give you a good right-handed lineup to combat that. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I didn't realize Adames hit as many home runs as he did this year. Yeah. He had an unbelievable year for those guys. So, maybe that's their saving grace tonight. It's a better matchup, for them. And again, I think if you're the Mets, I think you got to manage this game. Like if you have a chance to win it, you got to run all your guys out there and take a shot tonight. If you can.
I'm with you. No, I think you're spot on. All right, my brother, real quick in the AL, man, Baltimore, man. When you can speak to this. When you get into a funk at the plate, oh my God, it's torturous. And the Orioles, that lineup, which was so good for much of the year, which has got some big bats, right? Good young talent. Man, they just went quiet. And Reagan's for Kansas City yesterday pitched a gem, but this lineup couldn't generate anything.
No, and I think I thought I heard last night on the telecast they said they had to take him out because he had a calf issue, started to
Yeah,
cramp. Is that
yeah,
what they said?
yeah.
Yeah, because he threw really well, and it's like I actually feel really bad for the Orioles fans because it's been such a long time since they've won a playoff
I
game.
know, I
They've
know.
been really good the last 2 years in the regular season, but it's one of those things where guess what? It's a new season, and it doesn't matter what you did for 162 games. Unfortunately for them, and you're right. I mean, they can hit home runs with the best of them that lineup, and they were just. And they were. He just really had them tied up in knots last night. So, yeah, it's you just wonder when you have that bad of an offensive performance. I think is the manager and the hitting coach for the Orioles. You really hope that guys don't really start to press even more because that could very likely happen again today.
And on the other side, my favorite player. I love this kid, and he came up big yesterday. The only run he drove home the only run, and it's Bobby Witt Jr., who
Yeah.
is, dude. He does everything, and he's the greatest kid you'll ever want to meet. Did you hear the story about him when they went to scout him in high school?
I'm not sure.
So I love this story. In fact, I tell my son who plays baseball and his teammates about it. So he was the best player on his team. He was the kid who got every bat, right? Like, usually on deck guy gets the bat, and that he got every bat. Everybody was up. He was on the front rail cheering on his teammates. He went. It was a big game. There's a ton of scouts. They played at the rival school. He goes up, strikes out his first at bat, and they're chanting overrated. Right? Scout says he's watching the kid, goes right back, cheering on his teammates. Didn't hang his head. Did nothing like that. Cheering on. Next at bat, hits 450.
Yeah, it's like guys like that. Like it's funny because we go out, we recruit, we watch a lot of high school and travel ball games, and one of the things that you pay attention to, the same way that a major league scout would, was how guys interact with their teammates, really how they do with failure, right? Because we've all seen guys, younger players, get frustrated, they throw a helmet, they pout on the sideline when things don't go their way, and Kansas City, they got that one right because he's going to be a guy that he'll be the face of that franchise probably for the next 10 or 12 years. Like you don't get an opportunity to take those guys. There's not enough of them. Right. And when you pick high in the draft, there's a lot of pressure to get that pick right. And as we know, people make mistakes with guys all the time in the first round with baseball. There's a ton, especially with high school kids because
Oh,
they're so young. But like you think back to guys that really embody what you want to lead your franchise. And you think of a guy like a Buster Posey or Alex Bregman, or you're talking about a guy like Witt. I mean, the list goes on and on. And if you get a chance, you get that one right, man, it can really change the trajectory of your franchise for the next, 8 to 10 years.
nah, you're just spot on, man. I love that kid. But this is it, man. This is October, and the stars come out, and the games just gets it get drama. It's just awesome. This is why we watch, dude. This is you as a baseball guy. You're captivated by. I love the fact that you're captivated by this.
Oh, it's awesome. It's, I'll be sitting around watching games with family, brother-in-law, neighbors. Last year we had a watch party. I live in Fittler Square. We pulled the TV out on South Krosky Street. It was awesome. So it's just a great time of year for everybody. And I think one of the things is as big of a Eagles town as Philly is. I think one of the cool things about the Phillies playoff run, there are more casual fans that the playoffs bring out. So it's just a different vibe. And don't get me wrong, you know how big of an Eagles fan I am, right? It was a rough Sunday in my living room. Um, but yeah, there's something different about everybody. There's more people that are just attached to the game of baseball, you know. And I think it's more of a family thing where everybody played catch with their mom or their dad or their sister. You can't say that as much about football. And it's just a really cool time of year. And when the Phillies are going and you're walking around town and everybody's got Phillies gear on, it's like it's a different type of energy in the city. It's one of the things I really love about living in the city. It's awesome.
Hey, it's the best. You're so spot on. Hey, before we get out of here, congratulations, man. You have made Penn baseball a force. I mean, what you've done there has been really, really impressive, and you deserve a lot of accolades, buddy.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, I've got a lot of help here too. It's not just me. I've been really fortunate. Our coaching staff, Josh Schwartz, who's a local guy, Mike Santillo, Derek DeMaria. Those guys have done a lot of really good recruiting, and on the player development side, it's been great too. And it's cool because last year 2 of our guys got selected by the Phillies, Eli Trope and Ryan Dromboski, who's a local kid from Northern Burlington. So two guys in the Phillies farm system. And another cool fact that the assistant scouting director for the Phillies also played for me at Penn, Connor Betbees. And he's the assistant
man,
scouting.
That's right.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of ties, and it's a fun time for the city and for all the Phillies fans, and yeah, it's cool to be able to put my fan hat on this time of year. You know what I mean? And just sit back and watch all the games. I get it. I get into them, so it's great.
Well, I love picking your brain as a great baseball guy, talking about this. This was a blast, my brother. So thank you. We'll be doing it again. So we appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks, cuz. I appreciate it, man.
Here he is, Penn baseball coach John Yurkow. I hope you enjoyed it. Every day, tune in 5 o'clock. We will be doing our Red October special. Each day, take a look at what's going on, and especially as the Phillies commence, and it really becomes Red October on Saturday. Everybody, thanks for hanging as always. Thanks to Andrew Frazier. Did a great job producing as always. And don't forget, a little bit later on, Cuz's Corner tonight, we'll take a look at all the weekend's football as well. So have a great night, everybody. And we'll see you tomorrow right here on Red October Special, presented by Ace Hardware Home Services. Again, check them out, acehardwarehomeservices.com, to get started on your next project. I'm using them, all right? They're fantastic. Ace is the place, and so is it right here.
We all silly like the mayor.